think I just covered all of this. I should follow my slideshows. I forget to change slides sometimes. So can you remind me? Yes. Yes, you. Yes.
I just had a quick question. Like, how do you actually like measure temperament? Because it's obviously going to be different from like how you measure it in like children. So is that through like observation and then they can measure it through like a questionnaire or something when they're older?
Yes. When you're trying to study infants, you basically only do it through observation and usually in experimental settings, right? And all research on babies is done basically through observation. You also, however, remember, we've talked about research methods, right? So if you're doing an observational case study, for instance, you want to have that information also able to be checked out through data from another source, correct? So maybe you want to do an observation of the child. You want to also ask the parents to report on the child's routines, reactions, responses. And yes, as you become older, reactivity can be measured using questionnaires that test or check for how intensely you would react, but more likely in lab settings or in experimental settings rather. So an experiment on reactivity could possibly even look like, okay, you have a control group and you have a group of people who have self-reported high levels of reactivity, and then you kind of show them, let's say, a video in which there's a surprise pop-up every 30 to 40 seconds or at random intervals, and you record the responses of those participants, and you also then ask them to self-report what they thought of their conscious responding or reactions to that stimulus. So that's kind of how you would go about it, right? Okay, so we've kind of already done this and this and this.
I also have a question.
Yeah.
You mainly talk about people being highly reactive and then learning to cope up with it. If, for example, a person faces certain circumstances which, and they react in a very calm way, but those circumstances make them react highly in a different way. So, is that okay, or is that country good?
There depends on situation, right? I mean, there are certain situations that the nature of the situation in and of itself is such that you will react intensely and quickly. But it's also possible you will react intensely but not quickly. Okay? If you remember, I mentioned to you 3 types of sentiment, and one of them was slow to warm up. Sorry, I'm looking for my hand sanitizer. One of them was slow to warm up. Slow to warm up children have been found to not have problems in 0 to 3, even a little bit older, they don't have too many issues, no challenges. Um, but by the time they're like 6, 7 years old, which is when language abilities also evolve further, slow to warm up children have a lot of problems in school because they get left out of activities, they don't do well on group work, they don't participate, and so there's like a direct impact there as well. And just kind of going back to that relationship with the environment and genetics, here's a question for you, which is, if there is a child who's slow to warm up and hence has problems with group work, has problems in class, whatever, what is the role of the environment in helping this child or not helping this child? Somebody give me an example of how the environment can facilitate this slow to warm up child to avoid negative academic outcomes, and somebody think of how you would help this slow to warm up child, how you would not help this slow to warm up child, and this kid will go on to have negative outcomes. Can people online also think about this, and you guys in class also? Josefa Ali, go for it.
Okay, so जैसा कि आपने कहा कि स्लो टू वार्म अप कोई चाइल्ड है और उसको किस तरह मतलब नेगेटिव आउटकम्स किस तरह आ सकते हैं, तो वो ये इस तरह होता है कि उमूमन जिस स्कूल में मैंने पढ़ा है तो उसमें यूँ होता था कि जो अच्छा पढ़ने वाले होते थे टीचर की तवज्जो और ध्यान उस तरफ होता था ज़्यादा, ठीक है, और जो पीछे बैठे होते थे या जिनको मतलब जिस तरह वो बोल नहीं पाते थे, ठीक है, क्लास में, तो उनकी तरफ तवज्जो कम होती थी, फिर उनके सवालात भी नहीं लिए जाते, ना उनसे पूछा जाता था कि आपको कोई सवाल है या नहीं है। तो मेरे ख़्याल में इस तरह के जब तवज्जो नहीं दी जाती तो उनके ऊपर नेगेटिव कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस हो सकते हैं।
That's absolutely right. If a slow to warm up child is not, that refers to the fact that the child is not very reactive, is likely not to participate. If the teacher does not encourage the child to speak, the child is going to suffer academically. So that's very good. Absolutely right, Muzaffar. Thank you. Next, you. Your name, please. Hania. Vanya.
It could be like simple question. The teacher or whoever is the parent or the teacher gives like extremely reactive responses. So maybe if the child is sort of stepping up or doing something, um, like giving an extremely reactive response to that, or maybe just reacting in a worse way, would sort of inhibit the child from participating further or participating more.
That's correct. I'm asking, what does that look like?
So,
That's what we already said. Think about it. Sara Bhavani.
So it's like a common practice in schools where teachers have like kind of these grading, these charts where they put up and then they put up stickers like stars and behavior charts basically to encourage the children who are not speaking as much. And then if they do speak, they give them a star or something, which could be an example of positive reinforcement. But it
Yes.
could also go the wrong way because then it could push them into like further shyness or like not speaking up and rebelling and being like we're going to not speak because there's a whole chart and there's a whole system set in place to force us to speak, and it could go the wrong way.
Is there anybody in class who was that kind of child? Were you ever a child who didn't respond to stickers? Anybody? We have like 53 people, I think, online, and like, I don't know, 40 of you in class, 30 of you. So anybody responded negatively to a sticker? No. But there's a reason for it. It's not a trick question. There's a reason for it. Children are at their most basic, at that age, remember, children are not capable of that complexity of thought that would enable them to think, "Gee, here is a sticker, I don't like this teacher, I want to rebel, I don't like authority, I'm not going to do this." Okay, that happens when you're about 9, 10, 11 years old. If it is happening as a child that young, you have to investigate further. Because, yes, it could absolutely just be a personality quirk, it could just be a preference, maybe the sticker is of animals, the child doesn't like animals, whatever. It could be all of that, but it could also be something that indicates the development of some sort of pathology, but that would possibly be a complete overreaction if you're just basing that assumption on this one quality that you observe, right? So be careful. Again, like really consider that there are consequences of the environment, but also some things are beyond that. Yes.
Maybe not always children, need to rebel when there is a positive reinforcement. But it may be that when they see, okay, teacher is giving a star or teacher is giving a candle or anything like that, they may be like, okay, I will not be able to speak up and I will not be able to get a star or get something like that. So that is a stress as well. So maybe that could be a cause of uh, not being able to warm up quickly then.
So a reason other than just rebellion is what you're pointing to. Yeah, there's what's your name? Umema? Kamran is saying that one of the things you have to consider is because that there could be a reason other than just being stubborn, or basically a reason other than an attitude to not want to speak in return for an incentive of some kind. Okay, I'm going to stop. So we understand that trauma is transmitted. We understand that trauma itself is very broad and impossible to quantify in one word. Trauma is super subjective. Everybody has a different experience of it. Resilience is something that we do develop in response to trauma. When we talk about resilience, oh, I got ahead of myself. When we talk about resilience, we are talking about something, a quality within us that enables us to adapt and manage changing situations. That is resilience. Okay, resilience is commonly misunderstood in popular culture as bouncing back. Okay, I myself would say, okay, that's not entirely incorrect, because your adaptiveness is what helps you bounce back from a difficult situation. But just to think of it as bouncing back is not sufficient. Okay, there is so much more. So, in response to trauma, you develop or you exercise resilience, right? When trauma is inherited, when it's transmitted genetically, the way it happens is through epigenetic markers, which, if you remember, are add-ons. They're add-ons, they develop outside of genes, and they affect the expression of genes, whether genes are manifested or not manifested, and how they're manifested, in what situation will they be expressed. All of that is your epigenetic markers coming into place. The existence, the very existence of an epigenetic marker is evidence of the way in which the environment has an influence on your genetic information. Okay? That is what you need to remember from this. So the reason we want to understand whether trauma can be transmitted genetically, and again, I want to remind you that they found distinctive markers transmitted from Holocaust survivors, for example, to like their descendants. But here is the problem. It is not easy to be able to make this a causal relationship, that it was the trauma that caused these markers to happen. Okay, because it could have been other factors as well. So we can't establish a causal relationship, but we can say there's a correlation, because only the descendants of people who survived the Holocaust have these particular markers. Okay, so when we talk about this genetic transmission of trauma, please remember, we are not able to conclusively identify a causal relationship there. Okay, very important. Yes. No, all the people, all the survivors' descendants have been found, but those that were studied, right? So again, an important qualification to have to be who was part of the study itself, right? All right, very quickly, we've talked about evolutionary psychology. We've talked about how nature itself helps you survive by enabling you to adapt to the environment with increasing efficiency. And nature does that by selecting out the traits and the characteristics that do not contribute to your chances of survival, while selecting in the traits and the characteristics that optimize your chances for survival. That is natural selection. And so over millennia, even the Homo sapiens species has evolved, right? If you notice, we've become shorter on average. That's just a small thing. It's not about behavior right now, just evolution, right? We've all become shorter. Why? Because we don't actually need to be taller anymore. Okay. Another response I want to explain to you, because there was a question in class participation emails about this. Okay, are our feelings Do they have evolutionary value, or how does evolution explain the existence of emotions, right? The thing is that, and we talked about this if I'm not misremembering, emotions also help you survive, particularly the fear response. And that's something I'll focus on. It's the easiest way to understand evolutionary psychology. So all of us have, as children, had fear of the dark. Okay. When you're a child, you need a night light, you're scared of the dark. Um, that is a very primal response, and it is coming directly from, according to evolutionary psychologists, that primal response is coming directly from your evolutionary protection, self-protection, whereby imagine hunter-gatherer societies, no shelter, whatever. If you go out in the dark at night, well, yeah, the minute the sun sets, it's dark, right? Because there is no artificial light apart from when you can light a fire. I'm literally taking you back to like that point in time, right? So if you step out in the dark, you're going to get killed and eaten, or you're going to get lost and you're going to starve and you're going to die. So the point is, the minute it's dark, you should be in a group, you should be in a well-lit, safe space. Right? That is where this very primal baby fear of the dark comes from. Yes, wait, sorry. Oh dear, okay. Sorry, I just read the chat, I apologize. And Ifra, you did point out an important also factor that would occur. Yes, Sada.
So I just I had a very relevant comment to what we were talking about, and it's actually how empathy itself is also something we develop for survival. It is also something we develop for survival, because empathy develops because it helps us trust other people, which is really necessary in having impact and like having other people around you. So that also shows us how what we're feeling has kind of evolved.
Okay, so empathy is something that can be taught. But, 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 what enables you to be empathetic is something you're born with. Unless you have a developmental disability of some kind, in which case that capacity for empathy is affected. But the ability to look at someone's face and determine their emotional state, and obviously we all have, some of us are very good at this, some of us are not as good at it, but the ability essentially to pick up on these non-verbal social and behavioral cues that you get from body language, facial expression, that is also, an evolutionary psychologist would argue, hardwired into you, and you're absolutely right, to help you to survive. Because if you misread constantly or do not have any ability to read facial expressions whatsoever, can you imagine being able to live collaboratively, collectively, cooperatively? No, right? And way back when, if you were alone, you were definitely going to die. Right? Humans have always existed in tribes, and that's something we will talk about in social psychology as well. But now, just coming back to this, something, if you recall the study of foxes, where their natural selection, the selecting out of the fear response to humans happened so rapidly within 4 generations of foxes. Obviously, for human beings, it doesn't happen that fast. If it happened that fast, possibly the phobia, that fear of the dark, would not occur in us any longer, because we've had access to lighting in the nighttime for at least 200 years, right? So you kind of have to account for that as well. And it's like, okay, well, why? It's because the way that our genetic makeup is transmitted, right? Or rather, what we call heritability, is an imperfect process. Second, some epigenetic markers actually do get reversed. Right? Third, we don't even know which ones will stick and which ones get reversed. We just know that sometimes trauma markers, epigenetic markers, Those can be reversed. That doesn't mean your genes will change. Remember this, please. You can't reverse a gene. A gene is either just expressed or not expressed. Okay? Um, so it's like, think of it like a like a spider web, where if you try to pull one string and you think that that's the main string, and while you're pulling that string, tiny, tiny strands emerge that are attached to yet other strings, and then you find another main string, but when you try to pull that string, you find another, and then you find another. So that's the thing with evolutionary psychology, with behavior genetics, the science is evolving. And literally, quite literally, the science is evolving because technology is evolving, right? This is the same technology that enables us to revise our conclusions. It's the same technology that once upon a time told us the brain is not plastic and does not change after you're 18 years old. The brain you have is the brain you got, right? But now, with newer brain imaging techniques, we can see that no, actually the brain does grow and it does change and it is plastic and it is capable, or it allows human beings to continue learning new things after they turn 18, right? So this will also probably all look very different in 10 years. That's all I wanted to say. Anybody online, you guys have anything to say? No? Okay, I'm going to tell you about this ultimatum game, the fairness principle. It's not in your books, but I think it really wonderfully illustrates a lot of what evolutionary psychology kind of tries to get at. So in the ultimatum game, what they did was that they had groups of participants and they told the participants, you have X amount of money and you divide this money between yourself and another person. The way you want to split it, whether it's 50-50, 30-40, 60-40, 30, 70-30, 60-40, 25-85, whatever you want to do. 25-75, sorry, my math is very poor. Whatever you want to do it. Even if you give someone 2 rupees of the 100, you can still keep the 98. But for you to be able to keep some money, you gotta share it with someone. Okay? What do you think happened? So one person is saying that they probably kept most money for themselves and gave the least away. Okay.
I'm guessing that because,
Not because, just answer my question.
that most of the people who participated kept an equal share. I mean, अगर आप इसको graph पढ़ के just settlement, so about most of the majority of people kept a fair amount, like 50, 45, 55, 59% divided.
Run this slide.
मैं यही कह रहा हूँ.
It's fine. Okay, so my question was actually, what do you think would happen? And I probably shouldn't have shown you guys the slide before asking the question. But okay, the assumption is that yes, most people will just keep the majority of the money themselves. There's no compulsion, there's no judgment. But interestingly, in Western societies, they found that people were actually more inclined towards a more even split. Okay, 45% you take, I'll keep the rest, or I'll keep 45%, you keep the rest, whatever. In collective societies, collectivist cultures, there was a range of distribution. Some people said, you keep 15% of this money and I'll keep the rest. But some people said, you keep 75% of this money and I'll only keep 25%. This does not mean that people living in collective societies share less, because they're collective societies. right? Collectivist cultures defined by how close they are to each other, how close knit they are. But Western society is so individualistic. So you assume like, oh my God, totally self-interested. But we're wrong because they do this even distribution. But does that mean necessarily that they are, let's say, more morally upright and more fair than people in collectivist societies, who some of whom kept almost all the money for themselves? And the reason the psychologists are studying this is because they're trying to see, is there a universal morality of some kind that we have inherited over millennia? And they find this result, right? Which on the surface of it tells you, कि fairness is not a concept that we all inherently have on the surface of it. But then think about what actually is fair. So when they dug deeper into their findings, what they realized was in collectivist societies, a lot of the people who had given less money simply gave less money because, not because they were being unfair, but because in collectivist societies, cultures are built on reciprocity, right? So it's like, okay, I'm just going to give you 15% of my money because I already know that more than money, you need books, or more than money, you need, I don't know, and I can't think of anything that is moneyless. But anyway, the point is, they recognized that there were other opportunities and other ways of giving to people, because that's what collectivist cultures are like, right? You take your neighbor's food, you go help out no matter what is happening. You'll go and help out anybody in your street who seems to be having trouble with something. Well, I hope you will at least. And I'm saying you because I feel like we very much live in a collectivist culture like that. In an individualistic culture, on the other hand, the opportunities to share are limited because people are so independent and focused on the individual self. The point is simple. Fairness exists in both those cultures. It's just that the practice of it is different, right? So evolutionary psychologists, based on the ultimatum game, would answer you and say that, well, there is a universal concept of fairness that is engineered into us. What is the downside? How do you find the fairness gene? Right? Where does the empirical evidence that supports a causal relationship, where does it come from? Do you see the problems with evolutionary psychology? Like, it sounds great, right? And it makes so much sense when you consider that, like, you can find all this information about the genetic makeup of particular groups, but then you have to account for a grain of salt in those findings. Yes?
I was looking for how to decide what's best. So there's also quality perspective. So why and what would be better on the
Absolutely, that's a very good. What's your name? Umer. Umer is saying, who decides what fairness looks like? I mean, very good. If in the research design, fairness was to be measured by this, how you distribute money, it also absolutely matters, okay, what is the actual value of money also, as it is seen in a particular society or by a particular individual, right? Very important, good point. Okay, so, right, I literally just said this, grain of salt. But a lot of the studies show a lot of, so you see a lot of sexism in the findings of psychological research where, how many of you, you're very young, but have you ever heard that men are from Mars and women are from Venus? This really crap book about this nonsense. That is literally psychology at its worst. Okay. Any theory that tells you nonsense like men are left, no, what? Men are right-brained and women are left-brained, or women are more emotional and this has been proven by science, and so women are better caregivers. This is all nonsense. Okay, and I can literally tell you that it's nonsense because number one, the hypotheses themselves are completely driven by cultures that see women as caregivers and simply want to prove that women should be caregivers. Number two, the instruments used to determine that, oh my God, women are more likely to be depressed because they're born like that. Even those instruments are fundamentally flawed because when you examine the difference in the questionnaires given to men and given to women, you will see they are leading questionnaires. They're full of bias and they're full of assumptions. Point number three, a lot of these studies will support themselves saying, oh, you know, magneto-enso, whatever MEG is the thing I can never pronounce or remember the full form of it. We use this imaging technology and look at all these bright colors. They show that this area of the female brain is active and that shows this. That's just showing a relationship. It's not establishing cause. Second, when a researcher talks about a significant difference, what actually is significant is very much decided by the researcher themselves, right? So guess who does most of this research? Right. So another such sexist concept that exists in evolutionary psychology is that men just want to have children and women just want to have men's children. Right? Like reproduction. Reproduction is the aim of the species so that the species survives. Darwin would say that. I don't know what Darwin would say about the number of women choosing not to have children in today's world. But again, notice sexism, bias, it's all around you. Think about it. Just because it's science doesn't mean it's science. Yes?
So you're saying there's basically no implication of having male versus female brain scientifically?
There is implications, but they come from the environment. Women are more emotionally intelligent because they're taught to be.
Even through evolution, like there are specific things, like for example, women see color better, men see fast-moving objects better because there are hundred factors for women had to choose, who to choose. Like, so there are some gender differences in our brain.
Yes?
So, I mean, you can't,
How do you know?
no, I mean, like, obviously you can argue that the research is biased, and obviously that is a component of it. But to say that all of that is nothing and they,
Let me tell you something. So we studied that the brain is plastic, right? Which means that the shape of the brain changes over time, correct? So if certain parts of the brain are more developed in men, whereas other parts of the brain structurally appear to be more developed in women, that does not imply that this difference is natural and biological, which is what these researchers imply. That's the problem, right? So that's why when you first asked this question about, well, what about the actual difference that exists? I said there isn't a difference. Biological determinism is the wrong way to go because that supports the assumption that the differences, and this is the assumption that most of the research on gender in psychology is coming from. The inequality is internalized and appears, but is never stated. Right? So you have to consider that, and you have to consider that with all the research that we read. Most of it is done with just men. So keep that in mind. And this will, I'll bring up gender in pretty much every class because you have to deconstruct it. You have.
Right. Is this a personal and epigenetic markers have role in this? Like, for example, if if you take a matter of provision for chemical generation are forced to be submitted organized, like that's sort of from and then subsequent generations of it all tend to be organized because of that.
Yeah,
Possible and that reason also
definitely. Absolutely. Ramin said that is it possible that women, sorry, Ramin said that is it possible that women also, because some of them are basically, most of them, many of them, are forced to be submissive, and that in itself is a form of emotional trauma. So can that leave epigenetic markers? And my question, my answer rather, is that absolutely yes, there has to be a relationship there. And some of this abuse is really intense, and we cannot say that, oh, it hasn't done anything. Like, it must have. I just can't refer you to any sort of research that I'm aware of on the subject. 1 second. We had a case study in A levels, and its conclusion was that men are more aggressive than women. The problem here with that case study is how is aggression defined? Because yes, men do produce more testosterone than women. Yes, testosterone is related to aggression, but also aggression is not just physical or verbal, extreme, sort of almost violent reactions. Aggression can also take the form of, well, does anybody have a passive aggressive friend? I am most people's passive aggressive friend. So I can tell you, aggression can be very relational. And so it's about how you measure aggression. And yes, it is more socially acceptable. In fact, some would argue expected for men to appear aggressive. Very good, Amna. And men are absolutely underdiagnosed for illnesses like depression, while they are overdiagnosed for developmental conditions like oppositional defiant disorder or ADHD. Girls are underdiagnosed chronically for ADHD. It's just that the expression of those disorders looks different, just like the expression of aggression looks different for both genders, but that is a product of socialization. Yes, some of it is hormones, but a lot of it, most of it, I would argue, is socialization.
I just want to talk about that case. We can't deny the fact that, I mean, I understand that there is a social construction of gender, definitely. But biologically, there is a different, also a different experience between men and women. I mean, there are certain hormones which are, exclusively, not exclusively, but in a greater amount released in men.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that also has an effect on the brain development. So I mean, we can't pin it all on the social experience. Women are more intelligent. So
Thanks, we are.
Because they're taught.
But we are intelligent. We're much more intelligent. We are so freaking smart, man. I'm sorry, no, you're so right. That's a very good point that Muhammad Ali has made, where hormones have a massive influence on us. You're absolutely right. They influence everything, in fact, from your growth, your height, your weight, your hair. They also influence the physiological responses that you have, which we then label and construe occasionally as emotional states. It's a very good point. But listen, I'm not saying that there is no difference, right? I'm saying that, well, I'm saying that there isn't any difference. But I think what I'm trying to point you towards is that you can't reduce this down to this level of inequality where these statements become accepted as truth, right? That's the danger, because books are not talking about, there are hormonal fluctuations and hence men and women do respond differently to certain stimuli, but they are talking about the fact that, oh, men and women are different in a situation where women are inferior to men. They're not saying women are different, right? That's my problem with the research. And because if the focus was on difference, then it stops looking for causal relationships where there are none. So the relationship or the influence of hormones is correlational to a large extent also. I mean, I personally haven't studied biology in enough detail to tell you whether it's causal completely or correlational completely. But I can absolutely tell you that, for instance, when you are adolescents, testosterone is released for boys, right? And yes, absolutely, there is a lot more testosterone in boys than there is in girls, right? However, the issue is that instead of accounting for this difference in the very hormone itself, the study is simply going to say boys are more aggressive than girls. That's the problem, right? So you have to ungender the findings, and ungendering the findings means accounting for exactly what you pointed to. Right? So I really like what you said. I mean, it's probably important for people like me to also think about. but yeah, I would still tell you that all of this research, I would still not trust it very much. And there is a fabulous book on the subject if you want to read more. Remind me to give you the name. It's called, I think it's called The Gendered Brain. Yeah. And it's a very good book. But remember also that my focus in this conversation has been about the brain itself, right? And hormones do act on the brain, absolutely. So that's relevant. But we are, at the end of the day, talking about environment interacting with biology, right? So don't go towards one extreme, which would be the biological extreme, where you reduce it down, right? Where you become reductionist and you say there is a difference and it happens because of biology. So that's what I would say. Okay. So the underpinning of evolutionary psychology, when it is not genetic or biological determinism, is to evaluate the ways in which the human being is flexible, i.e. adaptive, ergo can deal with changing environments around them. Okay. So now, if I may, we need to actually start something today, which is probably not going to happen. Okay. Yeah, you have a quiz next Tuesday. Instructions are up here. Log on 5 minutes before class starts. So bright and early, 8:25. I'm going to give you guys the questions on LMS. You will have 45 minutes and you will be doing this quiz completely online. So no physical class on Monday next week. Sorry, not Tuesday. This is not Tuesday. Monday next week. Okay. Your quiz will take place on Monday next week. Humans online. Monday next week. It will be completely online. It will be on LMS. Have your video on. Log on 5 minutes before because. What we are going to do is when you're online, we're going to take your attendance and if you are not online on Zoom, but you submit the quiz, we can't count your quiz. Okay. If you have connection issues, you need to email us while those issues are happening and not 2 days later and say, oh, can I give my quiz now? No, you cannot. All right, so that's pretty much it. Good news, I have found a TA for 50238. How many people are from that section? Excellent. Your TA's name is Fatma Javed. Fatma is a senior and she is very bright and I will introduce her shortly. Zishan, Heather, you just proved to literally like 80 people that you weren't listening to anything I said. Anyway, what are the topics? Read the slide. All right, Fatma, are you here? Are you ready to put your video on? Oh, you guys can't see the chat. Oh, that's why you look so confused. Why didn't you tell me you couldn't see the chat box?
I thought that was on purpose.
No, no, why would it be on purpose? What have I got to hide from you guys about your colleagues in this class? Hang on, let me try to, no, still can't see it. Now I don't know how to stop it. Now? What? Okay. I need to introduce Fatma, and obviously there's no video that the people in this room can see. So Fatma, you can just talk to them. I will upload the slides in LMS, Sarah, today when I get home. Don't worry about it. You were supposed to do developmental psychology today, but I got carried away and we didn't do it. I did warn you that this would happen from time to time. So we'll pick up on Monday. We will start developmental psychology after your quiz is done. So you'll finish your quiz in 45 minutes, you'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll do a little bit of developmental psych, and we're going to start moving fairly quickly now. Fatma, can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah, I'm here. Hi.
Hi, how are you? Long time no see.
I'm good. Yeah, it's been some time.
Yes. Okay, so well, a whole bunch of people is here right now in the auditorium, which you can't see, but yes. Introduce yourself.
Hi, guys. I can't see you, but I've heard you're a lot of people. My name is Fatima Javed. I'm in my last semester. I'm a psychology major, and I previously took educational psychology with Miss Zainab, so I know her through that. It was a lovely course. I had a lovely time, and I'm hoping you guys are having a decent learning experience with her in this introduction level course. And I'm excited to be working with you guys.
She's excited to be working with you guys. Are you excited? You hear that? It's okay. It's 8:30, 9:30 in the morning. They're dead. But cool. Okay, Fatma, thank you. So you're on the WhatsApp group with all of them as well, right?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. Now, all of you guys in Fatma's section, we're going to do a thing today. If you send me an email with your CP, you're going to forward it to her, please. Second thing for everybody in either section, Vishani, you're really annoying me now. So for everybody in either section, please understand that when you are sending class participation emails, थोड़ा सा याद रखें कि हम इंसान हैं, ठीक है? आप हम लोग को sometimes भेजते हो in one series. We have one student sending us 5 emails. This is not cool. Okay? This is not okay. We're getting spammed. So I think Safa has already addressed this. I think we even spoke about it in the last class. But yeah, please don't send us class participation for the sake of sending us class participation. We are not stupid. You are not going to get marked for a dumb question. Okay? And I'm sorry I used that word, but what I mean is when you ask a question that we know you can answer yourself, you are not going to get marks. Okay. When you send us a reflection, we learned this, and this is what I thought about. And now I have this further question. That is when we know कि हाँ इसने actually सोचा था और ये इसका contribution है. When you send us these arbitrary questions, yo, we're not Google. Like, use a search engine, man. So, yeah, seriously starting to get a little irritated by the arbitrariness with which Google search questions are pasted in our inboxes, and also your randomness in assaulting us with 5 to 6 emails at one go. Like, why? You know, that just makes us less likely to read it. So please, said it once, say it again. Quality is your friend here, not quantity. All right? So be better, do better. If you want to send a combined email for CP for both classes, Fatma and Safa, how do you feel about that? I think it is a wonderful idea. I think it's something we should absolutely enforce. Or not, or not. I'll let you guys decide what you want to do.
I think combined emails for 2 classes at a time is fine. So it's like a weekly thing.
Okay, and Safa, what do you think? Okay, I don't know if she's here. But can you, Fatah, can you and Safa address this on WhatsApp? Whatever you guys want, whether you want a combined email for both classes or you want an email after every class, जो भी आपका preference है, just communicate with everybody on WhatsApp if you will.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Thank you guys. Goodbye, online class. Bye-bye.